Sing, 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 sing. Everybody start to sing. La-di-da, ho, ho, ho. Now you're singing with a swing. Sing, 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 sing. Everybody start to sing.
So is your family background related to the novel? Say, a part of the novel takes place in Zlín, where you were born. Well, yes, I drew on what I'm familiar with or what I heard from my parents or grandparents about the town of Zlín. But the novel itself doesn't really take place in my family. But Bacha Shoe Factory, well, I suppose that's a natural appearance because the novel takes place partly in Zlín, and if you are from Zlín, you probably have something to do with Bacha. I suppose the same applies to you, right? Yeah, well, definitely. My grandmother would tell you that we are somehow related to him, and I'm sure that you would be able to go through the family tree and find the branch that leads off to Bacha, because I'm sure that one of her cousins married someone. Zlín is a small town, you know? Well, I guess that's even better than just a geographic link with Bacha. In your novel, various topics intermingle. India, concentration camps, America, Czech Republic during the war, the Protectorate, as well as other more intimate subjects. So if I asked you what the leading theme was, I suppose you couldn't find a definite answer, could you? Well, if I wanted to find a definite answer, I would say that it is a story of love, of two people. It's a love story. If I were to give you a brief answer. Some people say that it's a historical novel, but to me, it is a story of a great love between two people, or perhaps a family story. And the fact that it is partly and importantly a Jewish story is also related to your family, or is it simply something that is deep in the heart of every Czech? I'd say the latter. It affects every Czech heart. We don't really have any repercussions of the Holocaust directly in our family. It is simply a trauma that all of us who were born in this part of the world have to live with and are affected by. But back to your question, whether I'd be able to give you a compact description of the novel, one person once told me that the novel is a little bit of everything. As you said, it has parts of India, then the 20s, the 30s, the 50s even. And that person told me that it seems to be a postcard of the 20th century. You studied English literature in university. Do you think that your studies influenced you? Well, I know it must have, but I'm still asking you. So what was the influence? Which authors, for instance? Well, it definitely influenced me a lot, because if you read a lot, then you absorb the stories, and those stories influence you. I was definitely influenced both by the British and American authors that we had to read, and to this day, Virginia Woolf is one of my favorite authors, and I even wrote a paper on her. But when I first read her, I couldn't find my way to her. In fact, I was skipping pages. And I noticed that, for instance, in one of her books, Mrs. Ramsay dies, and I finished reading the book without even noticing that the main character died. It was a book to the lighthouse. But then I read some reviews. I was smart enough to read some reviews, and I found out that the main character died, and I imagined, my goodness, what would have happened if I didn't put it in the paper. Then I started reading the book again, and then in the end I became an expert in Virginia Woolf because I've read everything by her several times. So it basically taught me not to skip pages. I mean, tough beginnings sometimes yield good ends. Yes, certainly, I have grown fond of her. And then also America. The novel begins in America. So I was wondering actually whether there are any American authors that you were fond of. Oh, definitely, definitely. It'll be difficult to single out one. But as far as American literature goes, I have to say that I felt that contemporary American literature was the closest to my heart. I was quite curious what you would say, whether you would mention style, whether the rhythm of American sentences has affected you, because you often work with short sentences interspersed with longer sentences. Sometimes the sentences are very, very complex. I mean, there are indeed authors that work with long sets of sentences, long, complicated sentences, while your rhythm is very easy to read. It flows. Thanks for the compliment, but I think I'm a simple girl, you know. I don't think that I could follow long sentences. I get lost in them. So perhaps that's why I work with short sentences. I want things to be clear. You're going to be reading from the Indian part of the novel, as it were. There is going to be a theoretical hitch that I'd like to address. But before I do that, let's go back to the novel. How do we get from Bohemia to India so that we would understand what you're reading about? Well, we're going to get there very simply. Tomáš Bata, in the 30s, started his shoe factory in Zlín. During the global crisis, he decided to expand, and one of the places he expanded to was India. So he was building a factory in India where one of the characters in my novel works. So that's how we're going to get to India. And then India serves as an exotic, if you will, contrapoint to the concentration camps. The grayness of the concentration camp is contrasted off with the richness of the colors of India. Now we're going to be reading about what takes place in the concentration camp. Sometimes you jump back and forth, so you're returning to certain places. But Rachel, one of the characters, also remembers her experience of India and in India, and she also talks about her interest in mythology. So these are not only issues that you are deftly combining to create an easy-flowing novel. I hope you agree. I'd like to agree. I guess I have to agree. So the sound of the sundial is about silence. There's a scene in which Thomas Kepler builds a sundial for his wife. So the sundial is a symbol, and it is treated as a symbol throughout the book. And then there are also sun myths, and you did speak about mythology. So there are Mexican and Egyptian sun myths, bits and pieces about sun gods from all over the world. And it is sort of a parallel story to the main story, and also for me, these were sort of like islands of repose where you can take a breath. Which brings us back to existential issues, life and death and human values. Is human life valuable? And if it is valuable, what is the value? So I guess we are perpetually returning to these kind of questions when we read poetry or when we read a novel. Have you ever been to India? No, not yet. I guess it's good, because it means that it is a lyrical part of the novel. I mean, I'd love to go to India, definitely. I've certainly felt attracted to India. I mean, I've been to some countries in the region. Like what? Thailand was the closest one, I guess. And of course, you can't compare Thailand and India. But on the other hand, both have Buddhists, both have marketplaces. And I guess the atmosphere could be similar. So you know India from books, because you often publish bibliographies. Yes, I know India from books, and I suppose you can't really get to know the India of the 30s directly. So I went into the archives, and in fact, I was doing that research also for other parts of the books. Some people think that it's not fun to sit in archives. They would think that it's boring, and I have to say that it wasn't boring at all. And that's what got me to study India of the 30s. You can't find that on the internet. And it's also about Theresienstadt. It's about World War II. And I suppose that was also a journey toward knowledge. Well, I suppose most of the research and most of the knowledge came from archives. And if you're interested in any history, there are actually newspapers from that time available. I read newspapers from the 30s or 40s. And it was a wonderful read, because you will really find out what people were going through, what was on their mind, what was in their heart, what was paining them. There were actually articles saying whether you should scare your children or not, and how you should mend your dress to make sure that it lasts through the war. There were articles saying that women should not be skiing because they look ridiculous, and when they go down the hill, they're all blushed up. And of course, it's difficult to go skiing if you're all blushed up. And quite depressing, I guess, if you read Zlin papers. Certainly there were some depressing stories in them, but for the most part, I felt that I was getting under the skin of the life of that time. Yes, people were scared, people had food rations, but they were also having fun during the war. But the intimate topic of love between and among those people, parents' love for their children, love as a result of a conflict between various natures of people. Do you think, having said all that, that this is the central line, the central topic of the book? Well, I suppose that's just my private view of the world. I guess it defines us, no matter what we do, whether we write books or whether we want to achieve anything in any walk of life, whether we want to win accolades. I suppose the relationships that we have toward the closest people around us define us the most. And I suppose for every reader, this book is going to be different. For some people, it'll be about the historical context. And if it's a young reader, perhaps he's not going to be aware of that context, or it's going to be another way of exploring that information. While other people will follow the psychological development of your characters. Well, I suppose we could go ahead and start reading. Good. And then we can go and buy the book. Definitely. So, I'll say that I'll be reading a short excerpt. Michael March asked me to read something, as it were, exotic. I didn't want to read anything about concentration camps. But I found a bit in the book that I would read. Ravish Ankar is going to play on the background. He has a gig currently in the city. As I said, the book deals with India and it contrasts it with concentration camps. And this particular chapter is about rituals that you can encounter in India, namely the burning of the dead. That ritual finds its way back into the book in a sort of twisted form through Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, you could smell the same smell of burning flesh. So anyway, we're back in India now.
Cítil se polapený. Byl to jiný svět. V ulicích Kalkaty pulzoval život na každém kroku.
Sing, 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 sing. Everybody start to sing. La-di-da, ho, ho, ho. Now you're singing with a swing.